So as you can see, it's a cluttered disaster in here. Everything's in here because winter is almost upon us. It's just packed in here. There's no room to walk around. You're always tripping and swearing, and it's totally my fault. I've decided to yank the engine on this because it's got no compression, tons of blow-by. It's gutless. It's horrendous on oil. A liter of oil every 100 kilometers. It's not leaking it. It's burning it. If it's not smoking black, it's smoking blue. So that's your options. This thing is finished. And after, you know, the million comments I got on YouTube and everything that this is actually a 6.9, it probably is actually a 6.9. It's not worth saving a 6.9. I'm not rebuilding it. So I'm going to peel all the stuff I want off it and put it on another 7.3 I've got a spare. And then I'm going to swap in a 12 valve. I've been preparing a 12 valve for this, and it's pretty well ready to go. But, yeah, this thing's not, it doesn't have anything good coming for it. That's the best way of putting it. I already took the filter off, drained the oil so I can lift it out, and where it's going, it's not going to need oil. So I bought this 12 valve a long time ago and put it together, and you guys saw the video of it running, but it's missing a lot of pieces. It's missing a lot of small stuff, and it's fine. I could convert it. I could swap it into something, but there's a lot of unknowns. So I'm still keeping it. I'm not getting rid of it. I'm just not putting it in a truck yet. Instead, I got this one. I bought this from old Dallas at Single Drive, and he had a video of it running. I'll see if I can put that in here. Otherwise, I cleaned it. I'm deleting the fuel pump. That's going to get a block-off plate on it. And I already pulled the front cover and put a dowel pin blocker in there. That's a 5-minute job. Well, pulling this not a 5-minute, but it's a 5-minute job to build that little blocker. And then I pulled the valve covers and took a quick look, made sure everything looked good. I set the timing pin right there, the lock in the cam gear, so that you can prove that this thing is timed correctly. And I checked it, it's all good. And then I drained the oil, it looked clean. And now I've drained the oil and pulled the pan and checked out the pan, and there's no metal filings and there's no real cause for alarm anywhere, so I'm not going to dig into this thing. Supposedly, it's only got 200 and, I don't remember what he said, I'll have to ask him again, 250,000 kilometers or something. The truck was totally wrecked. But the engine seems to have been well taken care of. So we're going to go with that. I've got the pan all cleaned up, and it's just about ready to go back on. I just got to finish scraping some gasket. And but yeah, there was not really any. There's the odd little piece of crap in there, but I didn't see anything really suspicious. And I've been slowly deleting stuff off of it. This thing was an automatic, so I have to put a flywheel on it. The flywheel is getting drilled and tapped at a machine shop to accept a Ford clutch because it's going in my Ford. And I'm deleting the fuel system because I'll put my own on. And the starter won't work. I'm going to put a... to put the conversion kit on, you put an adapter plate on the back, the flywheel, and then you put on a 6-liter Ford starter, apparently, is the answer. So, yeah, I haven't ordered that yet, but I'll have to order some stuff online. I noticed when I was going through it that the bearings are a little rough on this fan drive, so I'll steal the fan drive off the other one for now. But, yeah, we're going to retrofit it. It's going to be probably more work than I expect it to be, but I ordered the engine mounts and everything, so it should make it quite a bit easier. We'll see. And I'd like to take a minute to apologize for not making any videos for a long time. Between my computer crashing and the hard drive's totally wrecked, I definitely wasn't looking at anything dirty. Between that happening and my basement flooding because of a cracked toilet upstairs and totally ruining my house,
What a loser.
I have had no time for that stuff. So, it'll be time to get on to making videos again. Look at this. I scored this summer. 1928 Olds. Next project. So, I got the dirty old IDI turbo out. Now there's a big gaping hole where it was. And it's time to put in something better. And, here we got the 12 valve, it's got the Ford engine mounts on it, it's got the Ford bell housing adapter on it, it's got the flywheel drilled and tapped for a Ford clutch. I'm not sure about the input size, the pilot bearing. That'll be the next thing I have to figure out. But it came with this nifty paperwork, and we'll see how accurate it is. It tells you where to drill the holes and everything. So if that's any good, then we're gonna get on that tomorrow night. But for today, I did get this thing out. It came out surprisingly easy, way easier than it went in, because I had the clutch off this time. I took the clutch and left it on the transmission, and then it went crashing down on the floor as soon as I lifted the engine, of course, and landed in coolant and oil. It's great for the clutch. The engine actually lifted up, turned 90 degrees, and then just came out. It was effortless. So I'm guessing last time I was dumb, or every time. I haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, these mounts you can see with the oval shaped holes, those have to come off on both sides. And then according to the paper over there, I'm going to drill vertical holes in, and the engine mounts just sit like that. Of course, I'll fill you in on any odds and ends or any weird stuff. But I've already been in contact with little Peg there. And he told me he used an later generation Power Stroke intercooler because it fits in this front end. So it's good to have resources, people like that around. So I ended up having to I pulled the transmission in the transfer case because the pilot bearing is a different size. So rather than have to fight with it and then put the engine in, I'll just put the engine in and then deal with the transmission later. The transmission comes down fairly easy, with the exception of when you're dumb and you're aggressive. Sometimes you break things that should be easy. Luckily, I have entire spare sets of components. I'll just steal it off that one. Yeah, as you can see, the old 7.3 Barney out there is just smoking up a storm because, you know, it's like 3 above, so it's gonna smoke out the entire neighborhood for like an hour because it's like 3 above. Pathetic. Anyway, so yeah, this thing's ready to go in, and that's the next step. Look at this. 6 in a row and ready to go. The kit from Diesel Conversion Specialist thus far has been pretty good. The engine mount bolts fit right in the factory bolt holes. They go in the rear bolt holes. And it actually went in not bad. You couldn't use just one lift though. Even with a spreader bar, that's right there, you couldn't get enough tilt on the engine to get it to go in. Obviously, you're supposed to pull the front end off the truck, but I built this bumper and I know how it's mounted. I want nothing to do with tearing the whole front end off the truck. So I measured it with a measuring tape, and you know, that always works. And then I said, if I put it in there steep enough, it will go. So at a pretty vertical angle, it actually does go in. This dent here, that's from the 7.3, putting the 7.3 in the first time. The Cummins actually went in easier than the 7.3 did. Now, that might be because I've done this too many times, swapping engines like a dum-dum. It might be that this engine fits a little better. It definitely is a smaller footprint. It might be, I don't know, maybe 6 inches longer, but it definitely has a smaller footprint under the hood. That's obvious. Inlines always do. But yeah, everything fits good, except I've got a clearance problem with the firewall, which it says right in the Diesel Conversion Specialist, you might have to massage the firewall. Now, as you can see, I've got a valve cover off. That last one, there's no way. There's no way it'll go on. So once I get the transmission bolted in and figured out, then I can massage the firewall to the point where that'll bolt right in. So I decided to take a break from working on the Cummins because I've got too many roadblocks right now. Like, I need parts. I'm waiting on a turbo and a manifold. And then the flywheel, I tried to source out a needle bearing that would fit the Dodge flywheel and fit the Ford input shaft. It doesn't exist. That's the problem. So I did what everybody else does, which I probably should have done from the start. And I just went and got a 6303 bearing. And it fits the shaft on the input shaft on the transmission perfectly. But this has to get machined out. So now the flywheel has to get machined to fit that, which is not really a big deal. Just more money, right? Money. So I decided tonight to dig into the back brakes. And this is what I found. As you can see, it's welded together. What happened was, it was probably assembled wrong from the last guy I got the truck from or something, because I never touched the back brakes. And it probably, the springs fell out or something, and it fell apart inside. It destroyed the adjuster. All that stuff I'm going to have to steal off a parts diff in the yard here. That'll be in the next day or two. I had some brakes laying around from another parts truck, but they're from an F250. And the only difference I can see, let's get that loose, is that they're wider on the 250, on the 350 from the 250. They're a little wider, but physically in every other way they're the same. These ones are trashed. Anyway, so this wheel is going to brake like an F250 instead of an F350, which is fine because it wasn't braking at all before. Now, that's logic right there. That's Mechanics Inc. But, yeah, so now I just got to hunt down the parts and I can put this back together. I already built a brake line, and the reason I'm telling you guys about this stuff, because I had to replace the, wheel cylinder. I thought that's what the problem was in the first place. It was leaking, and it had blown out because the brakes had fallen apart. It didn't cause the failure. It was just a victim in the disaster. So either way, I replaced the line, of course, because there's no saving these lines. And here's the old line, and this is why I'm making this part of the video. Don't waste your time trying to unscrew these lines. If they're rusted at all, you always end up rounding off and twisting off it's garbage. It's painful. So what I do is I just cut them with side cutters, and then I just drill out the actual fitting. And then 9 times out of 10, you can actually reuse the nuts. You just got to build a new line, which is easy stuff. It's the cheapest thing you can buy. It's probably the most impressive tool for the price of all of my tools, is that stupid brake flaring kit. That's a piece of junk, cheapo, that I've had since I was an apprentice. And yeah, it just pays itself off over and over and over and over. So something else that wasn't in the paperwork was that you have to move the shifter back 2.5 inches. So I had to move, the engine being longer moves everything back 2.5 inches, which means I have to get my drive shaft shortened, the rear one, 2.5 inches. And I don't think there'll be enough slip in the slip joint. I'll probably have to get the front one extended 2.5 inches, but we'll see. We'll see when we get there. Drilling the frame to move the cross member back 2.5 inches is miserable. But I want to show you guys a trick that I learned a long time ago. Is that you just, all right, here we go. You put wires, just farmer wire, hay wire, whatever you want to call it. And you make it short enough so that it binds. And as you pull, it gets tighter and tighter. So right now, I don't even have to lift on the drill. I just push against the wires as I'm drilling, and it drills. It actually works quite well. Yeah, so I've had to move all these bolt holes 2.5 inches. As you can see, that's the factory bolt hole, and that's the new bolt hole. So yeah, once I get the cross member in, then I can figure out my drive shaft lengths, and probably pull all that stuff off and get it sent into town and spend a bunch more money. These are all things you don't factor in when you're doing it. I didn't realize there was a 2.5 inch length difference, but it makes perfect sense. The actual diesel conversion specialist plate that connects the Cummins to the Ford is phenomenal. It just went in, no issues, no problems. It actually wasn't too bad to mount up. I did have to pull the shift tower off. It's only 4 Allen head bolts with a 3/16 socket, but yeah, it's coming along. So we've come across what is by far the hardest part of this swap. Now, it's probably not that bad if you strip the front end before putting in the intercooler. But as I didn't, and the bumper and everything's still in place, I basically just hacked or cut everything out of my way. Now, of course, you would say that's retarded. You got to replace the front clip after and everything, but it won't fit in there properly anyway. So I'm going to modify it and maybe one day put a new front clip. I have spares. It just seems like a lot of work. So temporary permanence, right? So what I did here, and the reason I'm disgusted and why this is such a hard job, is because you have to remove a significant amount of material to get the intercooler piping around there. So I had to cut a significant amount of sheet metal out of the rad support and to get the intercooler pipes to go by. It's actually quite disheartening how much metal I removed. I'm not impressed, but there's just no other way. Unless you want to run a smaller intercooler. I know a lot of the swaps I've watched online, they put no intercooler, which it makes no sense. What's the point of doing a Cummins swap if you're gonna limit your horsepower, limit your towing ability and everything with no intercooler? It just makes no sense. Anyway, so I have to modify the release, the hand release anyway, and I accidentally cut the cable release. Yeah, some tools got thrown over that one. As you can see, it mounts on, these are just self-tappers, and it's because they're not actually holding it, the intercooler up. So I built pedestals underneath as per Peg's suggestion, because that's what he did too. And as you can see right there, that's what the intercooler is actually sitting on, is these little pedestal adapters I built. So yeah, now I just got to put the grill back on, which should be fairly easy because there's there's nothing in its way anymore because everything's broken or missing. I can't even put the top to bottom support in that goes from the hood latch down to the bottom of the rad support because it just doesn't fit anymore. The intercooler, there's only one place it can really fit, and it's right there. So yeah, that's the ugliest part of the job so far. Everything else has been reasonable, drilling, moving things, getting things extended or shortened or building new lines. But this part was ugly. Ugly, ugly, ugly. So I got the front end back together. And it fits pretty good. Everything fits. The intercooler's in. No big deal. I got the turbo in the mail today. The 3rd gen manifold is on. Or 3rd or 4th, I don't remember. And then that's an HE351 turbo. And as you can see, that's what's necessary to clear the heater box, because the other turbo came out here and went right into the heater box. That fixes that problem. And they're very, very cheap online. That turbo with shipping and everything was like $400. So it's just a factory turbo for a common rail 4th gen, I believe that is. I could be wrong. That's a 3rd gen. Either way, if you clock it correctly, all you have to do is move the center section so the oil line is facing up. You can use the factory oil line. You just flip it around, and then so that the 90's at this end, because it doesn't clear the manifold otherwise. And then I'm going to have to do a little body mod probably over there. But right now it technically does clear the downpipe. But I'm not going to be able to do a 4-inch downpipe without some pretty heavy modification. So I'm just not going to.
Lazy. Lazy.
I've got a 3-inch downpipe. And I'm going to adapt to 4-inch as soon as I'm clear of everything. Because it's 4-inch up to the stacks anyway. The boost pipes on the bonus, they are the same size almost as the Cummins factory boost pipes. So I'm going to be able to use the pipe connections and the hose and the clamps and everything. And I'm going to have to cut and, angle everything to fit on this particular truck because everything's slightly different. So that's the current project, and I'm modifying the thermostat housing because it comes out facing, I'm all confused now, but it comes out facing that way. Yeah, it comes out facing that way, and I'm going to cut it angle it, weld it so it faces up here, so that I just need a chunk of 90 hose to go in there. So yeah, progress is being made. It's coming together nicely. The throttle, the factory Dodge throttle cable from the P-pump model works with the Ford. All you have to do is you have to file. You can see it right there. There's 2 little bolt holes in the firewall from the original Ford brake cable, or throttle cable. And all I had to do was take a file. It only took 20 seconds, and file the round hole square a little bit so that the factory Dodge square plastic would lock in, and it just fits. It just works. So I have to build an alternator mount to run the Ford alternator because I want to. And yeah, as you can see, the throttle cable is just the factory one, so no issues there. And then the fuel system is fairly basic. I just got a filter housing right here, and I'm just gonna have to adapt a couple of fittings and everything. The fuel line's already gone around the back to the fuel pump. Some of it's fitting better than I expected. Thus far, the worst part of the job was still the damned intercooler. Yeah, buried away, tucked away in the front end. Don't worry about all the meat I removed from the front clip. You don't need all that plastic anyway. So the turbo downpipe is completely done. Completely done. All the way up to the stacks is done. And here's the drain line. This one is so the turbo drain on the factory one goes into this pipe right there. You can see. And it points up here. So you can actually rotate it in the block because it's just a friction fit down there. And then you take the factory tube, and it's kind of hard to see with all this junk in the way. It's very difficult to see, I know. But I just came straight off the turbo down with the factory piping. I didn't have to buy any more piping. And then went under the engine mount. I went under the engine mount and then met up to the factory hose. So you don't need anything to put the turbo drain line on. You just need a welder and a little bit of effort. It's actually pretty easy. I talked to Uncle Pegger, and he, if I'm not mistaken, he went over the engine mount, and then he ground a little bit of the engine mount and went in at an angle. But I didn't like the angle of the oil flow. It would pool up. So I built it to drain better that way. All right, so here we are. This thing is almost full of coolant. I spilt a bunch, so it's got coolant enough in it to test run. I've got no belt because they got me the wrong belt. So I can't drive it around because I got no belt. I can't turn the water pump. But I can idle it to check for leaks and check for problems and see if it actually starts. Intercooler piping went easy. All the connections and everything are pretty much done. I've got the factory Ford wiring with the factory Ford oil pressure switch. So the oil pressure is on the filter housing. That might have to move. And the coolant temp is on the outlet going to top of the head going to the heater core. That might have to move at some point too. But for the purposes of test running, as you can see, I made a transfer bar that connects both positive terminals. The negatives are on that side. So I have a grid heater if I need it. If I need it. I'm not going to need it to test run in the shop. I've got the air filter box off right now, and I haven't completely figured out the air filter. And it's just for test running purposes, and I've got this this plug to stick in there should it decide to run away or something. I don't see why it would, but you never know. Safety first. Trying to think of what else. I fixed the bad connections on the Carter pump, so we're going to cycle it to see if it works. And then we're going to try and start this thing and see what it does. The alternator bracket is built. I made it to be reasonably adjustable so you can put different lengths of belt on, because it's not one of the factory ones you buy, this mount. Like, I built it myself. So because of that, I don't know how accurate it's going to be as far as pulley distance. So the factory belt might not work. I might have to modify it. So for that reason, there's spacers in here. I can actually change its swing length to whatever fits the belt or whatever runs the tensioner the best. I might end up just ordering the right one for this, but for the time being, this will work. I'm just trying to think of what else. everything else is pretty well done. I have run the starter switch directly from the interior to the starter, and I'm now using the relay as a glow plug, or sorry, grid heater control. So some of this is done for security reasons, and some of it's just done out of laziness. I'm gonna test run this thing and see if we can make it work, and see if my lazy ass will make it better down the road. So I think I figured out what I did wrong. This is a fuel shutoff. I had it sprung that way. That's actually shut off. It's supposed to be forward to run. So I've got some fixing to do to make that work properly, but I had it kind of figured out, and then now I have it all messed up. So either way, it should start now, and that would be why I had to kill a starter to prove that stupid thing. Yep. Dumb. Very dumb. Smoking diesel, but it will not run. There must still be a lot of air in the lines, which is strange because they were all flowing pretty cleanly. Really? So right now we're looking at the spare engine. I had to pull this off. This is a air fuel control. This was missing. In here there's a fuel plate that controls everything, and it was just missing. This engine had the plate. I stole it and put it on the silver truck, but that means that someone has tampered with that injection pump. And that might explain why I can't make it run, because it runs bad. I did not swap this whole unit out. I just took the plate out and put it on the other unit, made sure everything moved freely. And yeah, I'm running out of ideas. I think that injection pump might be no good, but it's weird because I have a video of the truck running. Buddy said when you revved it, it behaved strangely, but that's not much to go on because in the video he's not revving it. So I don't have anything to go on. But it idled and it ran sitting in the Dodge. So something between here and there got messed up. And I don't know if it's because maybe the guy got it off of, maybe tampered with and stole parts out of the injection pump. I don't think so, but anything's possible. And I have to keep going down this rabbit hole because it runs bad. And I've already checked the timing. I've pinned the cam over there, and then checked the pin timing on the pump. These are videos you can look up yourselves. That stuff's all good. So the injection timing is good, and yet it runs so bad. It's not a mechanical problem with the engine the way it's running. It is absolutely fuel or fuel injection related. So I don't know. I'm going to continue down this path. So me and some other Cummins guys were brainstorming my possible problem. That it might be my fuel shut off. Either it's not engaged all the way, which it is, or maybe it's engaged too far. I'm going to test that theory right now and see if I can come up with anything. But beyond that, I might end up having to swap an injection pump, but I just don't see it. It ran in the other truck. What changed? It shouldn't be fuel pressure, I wouldn't think, because the lift pump doesn't make any real pressure. It probably makes 10 pounds at the most. It should run. It should run just fine. It's not running like it's a fuel pressure issue. It's running like it's an injection pump issue. But with this thing being modified, with someone having hacked this up and modified stuff, who knows? Who knows what's wrong in there? And I'm not an injection pump specialist, so I can compare two side by side. That helps. But I might end up having to swap the one off the other engine and send this one out to be rebuilt. And that's not the end of the world. But this one's got significantly less kilometers than the other one. So it should be in better shape, theoretically. So after much effing around outside this afternoon, I decided to pull the pump, because after a bunch of troubleshooting and phone calls and asking people, we all kind of agreed that it's got to be the pump at this point. So I yanked the pump off my spare 12 valve, and I know it works and I know it idles and everything. So I never got to really test it. I never got to drive it on the road. But the problem is, I got the one I put in the truck. So this is the one out of the truck. This is the Mopar one. It has the Mopar bolt pattern mounts for a throttle cable. And the one I got from Uncle Peg, it does not. It has the same holes, but they're not the same size. The holes are very large. Here, I'll show you. Those are supposed to be little holes, and they're very, very big holes. So, and they're not threaded. So I can't use any of the stuff off the Dodge now. So I have to build everything now. So now I have to redo the fuel shutoff and the throttle connections, which is a pain. And I've had enough disappointment for one day. But other than that, the injection pump is done. It's timed. It's timed. Everything's done. I have to bleed the injectors. The batteries are dead on the truck from messing with it all day. So I can't start it right now anyway. But it's ready to start. I don't need the throttle connection or anything to prove that the pump works. I'm just gonna tie the throttle and play with it that way. But anyway, yeah, tomorrow's another day. But it only took about, I would say, about an hour to pull both pumps, and probably 40 minutes, maybe half an hour to put this one back in. Maybe it's because it's in a Ford. Like, there's a ton of room. You can stand in the bay to work on it. I know the Dodges are a lot tighter, but these P-pumps are very easy to change. Much, much, much easier on an inline than on a V. The 7.3 IDI pumps are very, very easy to work on, but that's not usually the case. The 6.2 diesels are miserable. The 6.5s are miserable. The Duramaxes are miserable. Yeah. Tomorrow's another day. So this thing's finally done. As you can see, because I had to move everything back 3 inches, there's some gaps I have to fill. I mean, I filled them with sheet metal for now, but eventually I had to destroy this piece of plastic to get it out. All the screws, the heads were all rusted. I'll have to find one of those. I only have 10 of them in the yard. I'm sure I'll destroy all 10 of them taking it apart, but it's the way things go. I got the hood bolted on, the hood fit. All the engine stuff is done. Everything. The only thing it doesn't have right now is cruise control, and I have one little vacuum line that got cut when I was going crazy with a zip disk. And then, as you can see, I have an air box. This is an aftermarket air filter. Not very good camera picture, though. From a, I don't know, 2012 Chev. And I had to trim it so that it would fit lower into the hood. So the filter is pretty much touching the plastic inner fender well right now. But it's better than nothing for now. I will try and come up with a better idea, but nobody seems to have a good idea, because every time I look online, they're all goofy setups, or in Peg's case, a completely smashed air filter right there. Cold air intake. Anyway, next is test drive. I already bled the clutch and everything. I Loctited, as per Peg and Dallas over at Single Drive, I Loctited all the mount bolts to the engine. The engine vibrates so much that it loosens off those bolts, and those guys have both complained about that problem. So I just red Loctited them. I mean, I red Loctited 3 out of 4 on both sides. That's 75%. You can't get to the other bolt without tearing half the engine apart, so I'm just not going to. I'm just going to hope it all works out. So, here we are in the Cummins. I've still got some tuning to do, but it's running pretty damn good. It sounds like a dirty old 12 valve. I'm in test mode right now. We don't know how reliable it's going to be. Yeah, it does. It smokes the appropriate amount. It just doesn't have a lot of bottom end. It needs some pump tuning. But I'm headed to Grovedale for reasons you guys can probably guess. And yeah, I'm gonna get somebody else to look at this thing, and we're gonna make a YouTube video of doing something else, which you guys will see on someone's Patreon probably. And here's where we end the video. Stopping by a crippled, one-legged bastard for tuning advice. So here we are. Truck is officially done. There's some odds and ends that need to be tied up. little things. The headliner's not in. I got a tiny fuel leak on the rear tank, stuff like that. But for the most part, the truck runs and drives really good now. Yeah, I really like to thank Peg at Zip Ties and Bias Plies, because yesterday he helped me troubleshoot some things that we found wrong. Part of the overfueling was the smoke screw on the back that's tamper-proof. Someone drove it in and broke it off. That's why I never saw it. It didn't look like there was anything there. And then we leak tested all the injectors and rebuilt them. And Peg has all the equipment to do that, so he basically saved the day. Yeah, the truck's 100% as far as drivability. However, I do know why people run bigger tires now, because with 410 gears, you have to run, you're running too fast. So yeah, like to run 120 kilometers an hour would be almost topped out. So yeah, you're running a lot of boost because you're running the engine so fast that there's going to be boost. It's just the way it is. And I'll probably go from a 33-inch tire to a 35 at some point, but for the time being, it is what it is. Sorry it took so long for this video to come out, but working full time and building this thing in my spare time can make it a bit of a challenge to get things done in a timely fashion. That and my house flooding and my shop heater failing and just general stupidity. Thanks for watching.